This is a piece of live oak. Try to make a platter out of this burl. The first thing I have to do is cut away the waste on the bandsaw so I don't have so much turning to do, and I don't want to waste any of this pretty wood. So let's get to it. So here's that burl. Let's see what we can do. Oh, look how pretty and spalted that is. So that's my basic platter. Right now it's about 11 inches in diameter. It's probably going to end up being smaller. I'm hoping to keep it at least 10, but got some checking, and this is punky because, well, we know it's spalted. You can see it. I'm hoping to not waste any more of this than I have to, because it's pretty gnarly on this side. Look at those burls, those bird's eyes from the burl all over the place. So this is definitely going to be the bottom. It may be a shallow bowl. I want to keep it, I want to keep as much of this as I can. And I'll be back when I get it on the lathe. I don't know if I need to pre-drill these, so I'm going to pre-drill a couple just in case. Let's get this puppy on the lathe and make her round. A little out of balance, but it ain't bad. It'll get in balance. That's fast enough for now. And yes, I'm wearing my face shield. I'm going to leave some of these inclusions, but I don't want them too deep. I know a lot of turners at this point would give up on this because of this punky bark inclusion stuff. I'm not one of them. Because yes, it's going to take a little more time, but I can see the potential in it. So, in answer to your question that I know is looming on everybody's mind, what are you going to do with it, Billy? I'm going to clean this punky stuff out. I've got it roughly to the shape I want. I'll smooth it up a little bit with a scraper, get all this punky stuff out of there. That almost looks kind of like a Lichtenberg. So what I'm going to do is mix me up some colored epoxy. I'll have to do it in stages. First, to keep the epoxy from soaking in, I'll hit this with some CA, harden it up, and after I give that plenty of time to cure, I'll mix up some epoxy. I just have to determine what color I want to use. So I'll mix up some colored epoxy, and I'll fill these voids before I get them too deep. I don't want to waste any more material than necessary. And then we'll turn it around, or we'll turn it out. So let me get it scraped up. Alright, I'm just going to saturate the inside of these holes with some super glue up here on the end grain where I had some of that tear out. I'll give this a few hours to cure up good, and I'll come back and mix up some epoxy and put in those holes. Okay, I've got most of the voids filled to a point. We'll start smoothing it off a little bit, see what we look like. That burl looks pretty cool. You can see some of the eyes. A little depth sanding sealer on it. That's going to be pretty. Now we'll turn it around and hollow it out. Face shield. I don't know how punky all of that is, and because of that I'm going to leave the tailstock up for as long as I can. Going about 750 RPM. Pretty ragged in there. And I'm jumping between soft and hard. If this thing stays together, it's going to be a miracle. This finish down at about an inch is right where I want it. No need to scrape or anything. That just flew out and hit me in the face shield. Man, that is punky. But out here it's good and solid, so we might be all right. But before I go any deeper, I'm going to scrape from here up to about right there. Get that ridge out. That's my bottom. I don't want to go any deeper than that. So now just bring it across as level as I can. That is punky right there. I'm a little deeper than I intended to go, but I've still got just enough room to scrape this off flat. But before I do that, I'm going to unscrew this and use some Minwax wood hardener on the bottom of this bowl to stiffen that up. And I'll be filling these off camera. Okay, I've got the blue epoxy into the voids on the inside. Turn about 430. I'm very lightly going to go in and see if I can clean some of these up. The rest of that I'm just going to have to sand out because I'm starting to get vibration out here and I don't want to mess that up. Mylan Cellulose Sanding Sealer. I like this stuff. It dries really, really fast. It's not cheap by any means. Shoot it with lacquer. My preferred finish anyway. Come back in a half hour and another coat. Okay, got this chuck back up. One of the things I like to use for buffing out not just my lacquer but almost any building finish is Novus 2 Fine Scratch Remover. It's good for other things than just synthetic pen blanks. So that's what I'm going to use to polish this lacquer. You do have to be a little bit careful with lacquer when you're buffing it out, regardless of what method you use, because you can burn it or melt it. So it's not going to take much. And it ain't gonna take long. I'll put the donut chuck on it. I made this donut chuck myself. I turned and threaded this faceplate, glued some wood together. This is oak, plywood, and I think pine. And I turned the donut, I turned the two pieces of the donut out of Corian because I have a bunch of scrap. I made some lines about a ½ inch apart. Ooh! This donut chuck ain't big enough. It's not big enough. So, I hear you. What are you going to do now, fat boy? Well, I'll show you. I'm going to cheat. I've got closed cell foam on this and around the opening of the donut to protect my piece. I've got my center hole, so I know it's going to be center. And then I'll bring this up. Running pretty true. Just for a little added precaution until I get the bulk of this turned down, I'm going to use my soft touch just to help make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Maybe I was going a little quick. I've done this before and never had a problem. I don't get it. Prepare method number 2 and I'll be back. Okay, cut a piece of mouse pad about a 1/4 inch thick, old mouse pad. I've got it up against the chuck with the rubber side up against the inside of the bowl. Hopefully that'll keep it in place while I work on this. Now I'll finish sanding this up. Now if this was a relatively plain bowl, I would do some texturing down here to give it some, I don't know, just a little panache. But it's not plain at all, and I don't want to cover any of that up. Okay, let this cure for a little bit, dry good. It's dry now, but I'll let it cure up for a little bit and then go over to the workbench and chisel this off, sand the bottom, and okay, got a nice sharp chisel. Give that a little bit to set up, and then I'll come back and spray it. Okay, I've let it set an hour or so. Now I'm going to hit it with my first coat of lacquer. I'll probably shoot this with 2 or 3 coats. Just lightly to blend it down the sides. Let that set for a half hour. Come back and do it again. So here it is. I've got a couple of coats on the bottom. Finished it up. Oak burl. The bowl measures 10 inches across, 4 inches deep. It's got blue colored epoxy in the voids. I really like it. I really like it. The grain probably would have popped a little more. I mean, it's fine the way it is, but the grain probably would have popped a little more if I'd used antique oil finish on it instead of just lacquer. The only problem with oils like tung oil or boiled linseed oil or antique oil finish, it's a nice building polish. It soaks into the wood real well. They dry relatively quickly, 24 hours. But they have a tendency to amber the wood a little. And I didn't want this ambered. But they do pop the grain really well. But I think this grain stands on its own. I think it looks fine. It's plenty shiny, as you can tell, all the way around, even on the bottom. So another one done. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Come back and see us.